You're sitting in the cab, the sun's going down, and a screen the size of a dinner plate is telling you the machine you own won't move another inch until a dealer says so. The field's half done. The forecast says rain, and the only number that matters is the one on the invoice coming your way. I know that feeling because I lived it. That $5,000 bill in the title, that was mine. And it's the reason there's a German tractor sitting in my shed today instead of the green one I drove for 20 years. Here's what I figured out, and it's going to sound impossible at first. You do not have to keep paying these people to unlock iron you already bought with your own money. There is a way out of this trap, and it's been hiding in plain sight in a stack of documents most farmers never read. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a salesman. I'm a guy who farms corn and beans in eastern Iowa and got burned bad enough to spend 2 winters digging through court filings and state laws until I found the door. Stick with me, because before this is over, I'm going to hand you a specific document signed on January 8th, 2023, and a state law that took effect January 1st, 2024, that together give you rights you probably don't know you have. And if you already own a lockdown machine right now, sitting in your shed tonight, this is built for you too. This is not just for folks shopping new. Let me take you back to the morning it all started. It was late September, the air still warm, the beans finally dry enough to cut. I climbed into my combine, turned the key, and instead of that big diesel rumble, I got a code on the display. Just a code. A little string of letters and numbers, and underneath it the words that I will never forget. See your dealer. That's it. No explanation. No workaround. The machine ran fine the day before. Nothing was broken that I could see or feel or hear. But some sensor, some line of code buried in a controller I'm not allowed to touch, had decided I was done for the day. So I called the dealer, and this is where the trap starts to show its teeth. They couldn't get a technician out for 6 days. 6 days in the middle of harvest, when every dry afternoon is worth real money. When the tech finally showed up, he plugged in a laptop running software I'm not allowed to own, clicked a few times, and the code cleared. The actual repair was a connector that had wiggled loose, a $2 part, and a push of a plug. The bill was a hair over $5,000 when you added the service call, the mileage, the diagnostic time, the labor minimum, and the priority scheduling fee they charged me for the privilege of waiting 6 days. Now here's the part that kept me up at night. I could have fixed that connector myself in 4 minutes. I've rebuilt hydraulic pumps. I've split tractors in half to replace a clutch. I am not a man who's afraid of a wrench. But I could not clear that code because the only tool that talks to that controller is a piece of software the manufacturer will not sell to me. That's not a repair. That's a ransom. And the worst part is I drove home that night thinking it was just my bad luck. It took me a long time to understand it wasn't luck at all. It was designed. But here's the thing about a trap. Once you see one wall of it, you start seeing the others. And the first wall I want to show you is the diagnostic tool, because that single piece of software is the keystone of the whole cage. When I bought my first computerized combine, nobody told me that the manufacturer would keep the only key to its own brain. The tool the dealer used on my machine is called Service Advisor. It reads the codes, runs the tests, and most importantly, it can clear the locks that ground your equipment. For years, that tool was treated like a state secret. Independent mechanics couldn't get it. You couldn't get it. The local fellow who'd fixed everybody's tractors for 30 years suddenly couldn't touch the new ones because he didn't have the software and couldn't buy it at any price. Think about what that does to a community. The independent shop down the road, the one that charged half what the dealer charged and got you running the same afternoon, that shop got cut off at the knees. Not because they lost their skill, because they lost access. The manufacturer didn't have to put them out of business with better service. They just had to lock the software, and the market did the rest. By the time my combine threw that code, the nearest independent who could even attempt the work was gone. My only option was the dealer, and the dealer knew it. That's the genius of it, and I mean genius in the darkest way. They didn't raise prices in a way you'd notice on a sticker. They engineered a situation where the dealer is the only road, then they let the bills do the talking. The Federal Trade Commission actually studied this. In a report from 2021 called Nixing the Fix, the Commission laid out how manufacturers across whole industries use software locks, hidden diagnostics, and parts restrictions to funnel owners into authorized service. They found very little evidence that any of it was about safety. It was about money. The federal government wrote that down in black and white, and most farmers never heard a word about it. So that's wall number one. The tool exists, it works, and they decided you couldn't have it. I sat with that anger for a while. But anger doesn't cut beans. So I kept digging, and what I found next was worse, because it explained why nobody had stopped this already. It turns out the people I assumed were fighting for me had quietly signed a deal that let the manufacturer off the hook. In January of 2023, the American Farm Bureau Federation, the biggest farm organization in this country, signed a memorandum of understanding with John Deere. The date was January 8th, 2023, and it was announced with a lot of handshakes and press releases about how farmers would finally get access to tools and manuals. I remember reading about it and feeling a little spark of hope. Finally, I thought, somebody's looking out for us. Then I read what was actually in it. The agreement says the manufacturer will make tools, manuals, and parts available to farmers and independent shops on fair and reasonable terms. Sounds good. But here's the catch buried in the fine print. In exchange, the Farm Bureau agreed to encourage its members not to push for right-to-repair legislation. Read that again. The biggest farm group in America promised to back off the laws that would actually force change in return for a voluntary promise from the very company that built the cage. And a voluntary promise has a problem. There's no enforcement. If the manufacturer decides their terms are fair and you decide they're highway robbery, there's no judge, no penalty, no consequence. The agreement even kept the most important thing locked up tight. It does not let you modify the embedded software or override the safety and emissions controls, which means the exact kind of lock that grounded my combine, the code that says "see your dealer," is still protected. The deal that was supposed to free us was carefully written to keep the most profitable lock right where it was. By the spring of 2023, several more manufacturers had signed their own versions of that same memorandum. C&H Industrial, the company behind Case in New Holland, signed one. Others followed. Each one announced like a victory. Each one built on the same trade. We'll be nice, voluntarily. And you stop pushing for the law. I'm not telling you the people at the Farm Bureau are villains. A lot of good folks believed they were getting the best deal on the table. But I am telling you that the deal does not get your combine running on a rainy October afternoon when the dealer can't come for 6 days. I tested that theory with my own machine and my own money. So now I knew two things. The tool was locked, and the watchdog had signed a treaty with the thing it was supposed to watch. Therefore, I had to look somewhere else for the real fight, and that's when I found the lawsuits. If the voluntary agreements were toothless, somebody with sharper teeth was circling, and what they put in their court filings reads like a confession. Starting in 2022, farmers and farm businesses filed a wave of antitrust lawsuits against John Deere. These got pulled together into a big consolidated case in the federal court for the Northern District of Illinois. The heart of the complaint is simple, and it's exactly what you and I have felt in our gut for years. The lawsuits allege that the company illegally tied repair service to its own dealer network by withholding the software and tools needed to complete repairs, and that this let them charge inflated prices for parts and labor that a competitive market never would have allowed. The filings put numbers to the pain. They describe dealer labor rates running well over $150 an hour. They describe how a repair that an independent could finish quickly turns into days of downtime because the farmer has to wait for an authorized tech with the magic laptop. And they describe what that downtime is really worth, because every day a combine sits idle during harvest. You can lose thousands of dollars in grain quality, in weather risk, in the simple fact that the crop doesn't wait for anybody's scheduling department. The Justice Department itself took notice. Government lawyers filed what's called a statement of interest in the case, signaling that federal antitrust enforcers were watching closely and that the farmer's theory had legal merit. When the federal government bothers to weigh in on a private lawsuit, that tells you the claims aren't some crank theory. They're serious enough that the people who enforce the nation's competition laws wanted their position on the record. Now, I want to be honest with you the way a neighbor would be. A lawsuit is not a fix. It can take years. It might settle for money that goes mostly to lawyers. It will not unstrand you next harvest. But it did something for me that mattered. It proved I wasn't crazy and I wasn't alone. The exact thing I felt in that combine cab, the certainty that I was being squeezed by design, was now written into federal court documents by people with the resources to prove it. That gave me the confidence to stop blaming myself and start looking hard at every option I had. If you want to go deeper on all of this, every document, every lawsuit filing, every clause in that memorandum, and every practical step I took to get out from under it, I put it all together in a book called Fixed or Owned. It covers the full picture from the diagnostic lock to the Colorado law to the resale math I ran at my own kitchen table. There's also a companion guide called Break the Lock that gets into the specific actions you can take this week with the machine you already own. Both of them are in the description below. If you've been sitting on this anger and wanting a clear map out, that's what they're built for. And one of those options was sitting on a screen in front of me the whole time in a comment thread where a farmer in another country had already cracked the lock. For years now, there's been an underground of farmers who refuse to wait for permission. Reporters documented it back in 2017. Desperate owners, a lot of them in the American Midwest, started buying bootleg diagnostic software, much of it routed through Eastern Europe and Ukraine, just so they could clear their own codes and finish their own harvests. Think about how far gone the system has to be for honest, law-abiding farmers to go looking for cracked software the way somebody might buy a black market part. These weren't pirates. These were guys who just wanted to fix their own tractors on their own schedule, and the only door left open to them was the back one. I read those forum threads for hours. Men describing the exact moment their trust broke. One fellow wrote about a planter that locked him out during a 48-hour window when the soil was perfect, and how he sat there watching the conditions slip away while he waited on a callback. Another described paying a service call fee just to have a tech drive out, plug in, and tell him the part was on back order for 3 weeks. Story after story, the same shape as mine. A $2 problem, a $5,000 cage. But here's what those threads taught me that the lawsuits couldn't. The lock is not magic. It's just software, and software can be accessed. The only question is whether you can get access legally, openly, without sneaking around in some gray market that might leave you with a brick controller and no recourse. I didn't want to gamble my livelihood on cracked code from a stranger. I wanted the real thing, out in the open, on my terms. And the more I dug, the more I realized that door was starting to open, just not where anyone was pointing. Because while I was wrestling with all this, I started asking a different question. Not how do I beat the lock on the green machine, but what if I bought iron from somebody who never built the cage this tight in the first place? That's the turn that led me to the German tractor in my shed. And before I tell you about the document that seals this whole thing, I need to stop and talk straight to the person I know is watching right now, thinking none of this helps them. Maybe you're sitting there with a machine you've already paid for, a machine you feel chained to, and you're thinking this is all fine for a guy who can go drop money on something European, but it does nothing for you tonight. I hear you. So this next part is for you specifically, the owner who feels stuck, because there are things you can do right now, this week, with the iron you already have, and I'm going to lay them out plain. First, you need to know that the diagnostic tool you were told only dealers could have is, in fact, available to you. John Deere sells a version called Customer Service Advisor directly to equipment owners. It is not cheap and it is not perfect, but it exists, and you can buy a subscription to it along with the cable that connects your laptop to the machine. That same tool the technician used to clear my $5,000 code, a version of it can sit on your own laptop in your own shop. Most owners have no idea it's even for sale because nobody at the dealership is going to volunteer that information. It reads codes. It runs diagnostics. It shows you what's actually wrong instead of leaving you staring at see your dealer. Second, document everything. Every invoice, every wait time, every back-ordered part, every service call fee. Keep a folder, because the voluntary agreement those manufacturers signed says they'll provide tools and manuals on fair and reasonable terms, and the only way that promise ever gets enforced is if owners can show a pattern of it being broken. Your invoice is evidence. Your downtime is evidence. You are not just a victim of this system, you are a witness, and witnesses with paperwork change outcomes. Third, find your independent shop before you need it, not during a breakdown. The good ones are getting access to more tools every year as the pressure builds. Build that relationship now. Ask them flat out what brands and what model years they can fully service, including the software side. You'll learn fast which iron is repairable and which is a leash, and that knowledge alone is worth more than any extended warranty a dealer ever sold you. And fourth, and this is the big one, you can request the manuals and the tools directly in writing, citing the agreement by name. When you put it in writing that you are requesting access on the fair and reasonable terms the manufacturer publicly committed to, you change the conversation. You stop being a guy begging for a favor and start being an owner, asserting a documented right. That alone has gotten people access they were told they could never have. So even if you never buy another tractor as long as you live, you are not as trapped as they want you to feel. The walls have doors. You just have to know where to push. But the reason I'm so sure those doors are real, the reason I bet my own farm on it, comes down to one law and one company that finally broke ranks. And that's the secret I dug 2 winters to find. Here's the thing nobody selling you a machine wants you to understand. The voluntary agreements are not the only game anymore, because one state called the bluff and turned the promise into the law. On April 25th, 2023, Colorado passed House Bill 23-1011, the Consumer Right to Repair Agricultural Equipment Act. It took effect January 1st, 2024, and it was the first law of its kind in the entire country. Where the memorandum was a handshake with no teeth, this is a statute with real ones. It requires manufacturers to provide owners and independent repair shops the tools, the software, the parts, the manuals, and the diagnostic capabilities needed to fix agricultural equipment, not on terms the manufacturer decides are fair behind closed doors. On terms the law spells out, backed by the state. And here's what most people miss, the part that makes this matter to you no matter where you farm. When a manufacturer has to build a system to comply in one state, that system doesn't stop at the state line. The documentation gets published, the tools get made available, the infrastructure to support independent repair has to exist, and once it exists, it leaks out everywhere. Colorado pried open a door, and the draft is blowing into every shed in America, including yours. Other states saw it pass, and the bluff got called nationwide. The manufacturers always claimed real right to repair was impossible, unsafe, a threat to emissions and intellectual property. Colorado proved that was a story, not a fact. But the deepest thing I found, the thing that actually put a different brand in my shed, is this. Not every manufacturer fought the same way. When the dust settled on all these agreements and lawsuits, the company behind the European brands, AGCO, the maker of Fendt, took a notably more open posture toward repair than the Green Giant did. Fendt built its reputation on machines that owners could live with for decades, on a transmission and a build quality meant to outlast the man who bought it. And when I started pricing out my Escape, the math told a story the salesman never would. Yes, a Fendt costs more up front. I won't pretend it doesn't. But I sat down at my kitchen table with 2 winters of invoices, and I ran the real number, the one that counts. Total cost of ownership. Purchase price, plus repair access, plus downtime risk, plus what the machine is worth when I'm done with it. When I added the $5,000 codes and the 6-day waits and the strangled resale value of lockdown equipment, the premium on the open machine wasn't a premium at all. It was a discount on freedom. And there's hard evidence behind that resale point. Auction data tracked by analysts like the fellow they call Machinery Pete has shown older, simpler tractors, the kind without the crippling software, holding and even climbing in value, because farmers have figured out that a machine you can actually fix is worth more than a machine that can lock you out. So here is the way out of the labyrinth, laid out simple enough to start this week. The exit existed the whole time. It was buried in a court filing in the Northern District of Illinois, hidden in the fine print of an agreement signed January 8, 2023, and finally written into law in Colorado on April 25, 2023. The tool you were told you couldn't have is for sale. The rights you were told you didn't have are now on the books, and the manufacturers who built the tightest cage are not the only ones selling tractors. You can buy the diagnostic software for the machine you own right now. You can demand the manuals in writing, citing the agreement by name. You can find the independent shop while the getting's good. And when it comes time for your next machine, you can vote with the only ballot these corporations actually count, which is your checkbook, and put your money on iron from a company that treats you like an owner instead of a renter. I did all of it. The German tractor in my shed isn't there because I fell for a brochure. It's there because I read the documents, ran the numbers, and decided I was done paying ransom on equipment I'd already bought twice over. The day I cleared my first code on my own laptop, in my own shop, with software I bought with my own money, I felt something I hadn't felt since that September morning. I felt like the machine was actually mine again. That's what this is really about. Not tractors. Freedom. The plain, stubborn freedom to fix what you own, on your own land, on your own clock, without asking anybody's permission. They took that quietly, one software lock at a time, and they bet you'd never notice it was gone. You noticed. That's why you're here. You're the kind of owner who refuses to rent what you already bought. You're the kind who'd rather spend a winter reading court filings than spend another harvest waiting on a callback. That's not stubbornness. That's self-respect, and it's the oldest thing in farming. So I want to hear from you. Tell me your number. What's the worst repair invoice you ever got handed for a job you could have done yourself, and what was the part actually worth? Drop it in the comments right now, the brand, the bill, and what broke. Name your machine and tell me where you're farming from, because I read every one of them, and I want to see how deep this goes across the country. Don't sit on it. Type it out. And if you're done being told you merely rent the iron in your own shed, subscribe and stand with the owners taking it back. Next time I'm pulling the curtain all the way back on the resale trap, the exact reason a clean, simple, fixable tractor from the 1990s is outselling brand new lockdown machines at auction, and how you can use that gap to fund your own escape. Don't miss it. The way out is wider than they ever wanted you to know. You're still here, so let me say one thing. This video gave you the overview. Inside my membership, The Circle, I pick up right where I just left off with the full roadmap. You can also ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You'll belong alongside thousands just like you. Point your phone's camera at the code on screen, and you can cancel any time. No risk.